Hello and welcome back to another 5-Minute Fridays. Very minimalist today. I've come out with one camera, the one that I'm vlogging on, the XT4, the 18-1 lens, and a couple of filters, a 4-stop, a 10-stop and a polarizer. And we're going to do a little bit of ICM. Hopefully the wind's not too bad. A couple of Talk Tuesdays ago I talked about the fact that creativity doesn't have to be all about a final big epic image, and in fact a day like today where it's a little bit blue sky, albeit a little bit stormy, you can sometimes fool yourself into thinking, nah, it's not really conducive for photography. But why not get out and try some different techniques on a day like today? And that's why we're going to do a little bit of ICM. Now, another reason why I brought the XT4, I haven't shot a huge amount of stills on the XT4, but the whole reason for bringing out the XT4, cue people, is the multiple exposure capabilities up to 9. Now again, I haven't done a lot of this myself, shame on me. I'm mostly using the XT4 for vlogging, so I thought a little bit of multiple exposure, a little bit of ICM, hopefully we don't get too wet. But the weather was pretty horrific this morning, but it looks like we have a little bit of a gap, so that's what we're aiming for. Let's go. Kind of was down on the beach there, and you can see that lovely bright sunshine at the moment, and actually I quite like the effect. Sorry, there's a surf training session going on, so there's lots of people going to be running past, Baywatch style. I love the effect that the sun sort of shooting into the sun was given, a glimmer. Not overly keen on the backdrop, it's just a black rock and West Strand, but I kind of love how the light was shimmering off the wet sand and shooting into it. And of course I'm using here a double exposure, or actually a multiple exposure, average exposure settings in the multiple exposure settings. I think there's 4 different ones. I say I'm still getting used to the old XT4 in the multiple exposure, but I quite like how that looks. So the sun's kind of coming and going, so I'm going to go back down here and wiggle a little bit, basically shooting with the 10-stop on, and that's allowing me to vary my shutter speed based upon the aperture and the ISO. The 4-stop is just too bright to use. The 4-stop wasn't giving me a long enough shutter speed. Typically shooting each frame at about 2 to 3 seconds, and generally just having a bit of fun. So let's go back and see whether we can capture some more. Having a little bit of a problem with burnt out highlights where the sun was coming through, understandably, so I did a couple of things. One, did one image with about a 2.5 stop under exposure. I might be able to sort of paint part of that in again with still what looks to be the sky or the sun, rather than doing it in post. And then I lowered my perspective all the way down just to remove all elements of the sky, and there was some lovely sort of shimmeriness there. I also was using the black and white film simulation. My mouth is kind of going a bit frozen just because it's a bit windy. Very difficult to film, which is why I'm down in this little sort of alcove. It also looks like it's going to rain. Ooh, there's the wind blowing like a champion. I've actually brought myself now along to the harbour. And with a little bit of light on that lifeboat in there and a little bit more sort of structure, I might sort of throw a couple of shapes in there as well. That's basically what ICM is. You're just throwing some shapes about and trying not to look like a complete buffoon. We'll venture back out again into the wind and see whether we can come up with something. Very windy, very cold. Apologies for the luxurious backdrops that I keep finding myself in, but trying to stay out of the wind as much as possible. It is getting very, very strong, and it's actually getting very difficult to... Now I know intentional camera movement is all about wiggling things around, but it's actually getting quite difficult to stand up. I think this is the second blast of the storm Aidan, I think this is. So I'm going to start... We're actually losing a little bit of that sort of light, that silvery light as well, so that might be calling us quits. Good job this was only a 5-minute Friday, eh? But I really just wanted to get out. I'd been kind of cooped up inside for the last 2 or 3 days doing some officey type work, and I really just wanted to get out, but I knew with the very strong winds it was going to be not very sensible to be out anywhere in woodland and things like that. Speaking of which, I'm in the middle of filming a little woodland series, and I'm pretty sure that all the leaves are going to have blown off by the time I get back to the woods now. So, and of course being out in conditions like this here, no point with a tripod either, because it's just going to blow away. So bit of ICM, and as is always the case, and as I've spoke about before, you know, feeling a little bit get out with the camera, no real plan, a little bit of ICM, job done. Using that 10 stop mostly, just because obviously if we were at the edges of the day, dawn and dusk, I could probably get away with shooting with a 4 stop, but 10 stop's perfect, because then what I'm able to do is either muck about with the aperture or muck about with the ISO and get the shutter speed that I want. Still not 100% comfortable with the multiple exposure. I really need to get my finger out and get out for plenty of days just with the multiple exposure to see how the different options, additive, average, dark and bright, work. I'm sure there's some creative options in there that will allow me sort of to get closer to what I'm after, but I think I picked up a couple of images that were sort of worthwhile coming out. I'm now going to make that walk back. The wind is right in my face, it should be fun, and grab some lunch. As always guys, thanks a lot for watching, and until next time, from a very windy Portrush, take care, bye bye.